Water and energy are defensibly the two most significant resources used to sustain human life and the global economy. These two resources possess a circularly configured relationship known as the water-energy nexus, which is conceptualized in the following diagram. As shown, water is used to enable energy, and energy is used to enable water. Water is used extensively for fuel production, like ethanol or hydrogen, for extraction and refining of oil, to produce hydropower, and for thermal, electric, and nuclear plant cooling, among other processes. Energy is used for extraction and transmission of water, for drinking water treatment, for most uses of water, and for wastewater treatment, also among other interactions. What may be considered unique about these two resources specifically is their global constancy. It is important to note their irreplaceability before discussing how these resources are used and allocated. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, and neither can matter. Water has been circulating around the Earth for billions of years in several forms, but those water molecules have not actually left the planet in any notable capacity. Control over water and energy resources, then, is not always a matter of available supply, but rather their distribution and allocation. Renewable and continuous sources, such as geothermal, water, solar energy, wind and kinetic energy, and energy harvesting from the atmosphere, will be increasingly cost-effective and a significant contributor to our well-being. Considering its significance to human life, effective management of water and energy gains importance as an issue of public interest and as an opportunity for creative and innovative solutions by researchers, entrepreneurs, and practicing professionals of various disciplines. In fact, interdisciplinary and systems-oriented water resources and energy systems engineering academic and training programs were developed since the 1970s by leading universities and technology institutes in the United States and various other countries, given the importance of this theme. I am honored to mention here that the founder and executive director of the ITC program, Dr. Miguel Cardenas, was actually one of the leading researchers and academics at that time as a professor at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and as an associate of its pioneering Systems Research Center, created originally by Professor C. West Churchman, and who is recognized today as the father of the systems approach. Poor water and energy management practices most certainly play a role in the growth of independent and private auxiliary industries which capitalize on providing services the government cannot. For example, in places like sub-Saharan Africa or Central America, most regions do not significantly lack an adequate supply of water resources. However, poor federal water management or a direction of finances away from water into other industries often leave millions of people without access to clean drinking water. As a result, for example, the bottled water industry has seen significant growth all over the world in the past 30 years. In fact, Mexico has the highest consumption of bottled water per capita of any other country in the world, followed by the United States. Additionally, places like Cape Town in South Africa are experiencing record-breaking water shortages, which have now resulted in plans to ration out roughly 23 liters of water per person per day at designated water pickup stations, where people will stand in line on a daily basis to collect their total daily allotted amount of water for drinking, washing, and cleaning. This catastrophe may have been avoided or lessened with alternative or more adaptive water management strategies, and we will most likely see an increase in the number of water bottles purchased and consumed in the Cape Town area. When discussing strategies for water and energy management and governance, three things are important to remember. First, the connection of the water-energy nexus, which we have already described. Our current Newtonian understanding of physics, in combination with the 19th century industrial model by which most of our economic outputs are produced, tells us that we require water to meet many of our electricity demands. Similarly, some form of electrical energy is necessary to extract, treat, and distribute massive amounts of water in most large-scale modern water distribution systems. Currently, more than 3,800 cubic kilometers of fresh water is extracted each year on a global scale, which is comparable to draining Lake Huron in North America on an annual basis. Of this, roughly 70% of the water that is extracted is directed to agriculture, primarily for irrigation. Second, when discussing water and energy governance strategies, it may be useful to clarify which types of energy sources we use to meet massive water, heat, and electrical energy needs. The majority of our economic outputs require large amounts of energy to be produced. Coal, oil, and natural gas are the major trifecta of fossil fuels by which most of our modern-day global energy needs are met, and thus the majority of our economic outputs. So, in conversations around energy and economy, it is not uncommon for us to be referring to these three fossil fuels. Third, it is necessary for us to understand how these water and energy inputs are used, how they are divided, and how they are allocated. Furthermore, we must actively debate who or what determines their use, division and allocation, and the scale of their utilization, all based on the public interest or the opportunity for private investment and technology development, leading to greater value and lower costs to society. Global populations are sharply increasing, particularly in areas such as sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. As the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs 2017 report projects, the global population is expected to reach nearly 10 billion by the year 2050. The population increase adds stress not only to the resource demands for water and energy supply, but also to land access requirements. Having land access facilitates the development of water and energy projects which meet demands for the resources of water and energy. In addition, the growing populations increasingly demand inclusivity, innovation, and social and environmental responsibility from their government and managing entities. At the present, a vast majority of our water and energy needs are met by using fossil fuels. As previously mentioned, reliance upon the fossil fuel trifecta carries a growing number of severe consequences, such as subsidizing conflict and contributing greatly to environmental harm. According to the International Energy Agency, the total primary energy supply worldwide is met nearly half, or 46.2%, by oil, nearly a quarter, or 24.5%, by coal, and 16% by natural gas. Reliance upon the trifecta helps to encourage a continuation of a 19th century neoclassical capitalist mindset. As such, our understanding of modern economics is most often seen through this framework. However, the true environmental costs are not accounted for using this neoclassical model. Given the embedded nature of the global economy within the natural environment, the environmental costs excluded by the neoclassical model will later be realized in real dollar values by society and in environmental degradation. However, neoliberal economics is taught in a manner that separates the global economy from the biophysical environment, when in fact the global economy and the biophysical environment have an embedded relationship. 4 major issues exist with the teachings of extractive neoliberalism. First, there are a number of risks involved with the reliance upon fossil fuels. These include price volatility in international resource markets, and most importantly, detriment to human and environmental health. Second, the privatization of natural resources is often predatory and exclusive. Privatization of resources is largely made possible with regard to energy or water because the vast majority of these resources is underneath or above the ground. The land above the energy and water resources may be governed by public or private entities or groups, perhaps willing to sell or lease the land and resource rights, a process that often becomes very complex due to land tenure and social conflicts. Extractive practices which privatize natural resources must operate considering broader, more holistic and system dynamics implications. Many times, These practices ignore the embeddedness of the global economy within the planet's biophysical constraints. Third, relying on a diminishing supply of fossil fuel inputs for power generation plants and systems with technology that is over 100 years old is increasingly expensive and prevents innovation. Innovation could, for example, take the form of encouraging research and development into renewables to increase energy security, diversify economic portfolios, and reduce environmental impact. These challenges are being faced today by many state-owned, national and regional power companies and utilities in developing countries that in the past enjoyed market monopolies, now erased by broad energy reform programs. These national companies have recently reorganized and are transitioning painfully to become more productive and financially self-sustaining. Comisión Federal de Electricidad and Pemex in Mexico are good examples of this much-needed transition and modernization process. There are natural constraints to this planet that are incompatible with the modern industrialism and the neoclassical economic model. Short-term investments, a high rate of resource extraction, the privatization of the commons, giving nature a subjective dollar value, and an increasing wage gap cannot continue without serious consequences. Our use and sale of resources must have a sustainable limit in which our resource extraction rate is not above the rate at which the natural world can replenish itself. Responsible access to land and natural resources worldwide is gaining scrutiny in the academic and professional literature. Nearly every nation who is signatory to internationally recognized objectives, such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals or the Paris Agreements, has promised to institute projects in renewable energy, poverty alleviation, or biodiversity protection. In order for these targets to be achieved, land is often required to carry out these projects. Quite often, gaining access to the necessary land occurs in more rural locations with land ownership conflicts. Also, issues arise when land acquisition for large water and energy projects by foreign investors or entities lacks transparency and continuous communication between government, developers, and local communities around which the project will be built, as demonstrated in my own academic research in 2017 of the people in the Turkana Basin of northern Kenya in Africa. In governance of water and energy resources, long-term thinking, inclusive deliberation in decision-making, environmental health, and social development, and the recognition of the embeddedness of our global economy within biophysical constraints of our world are crucial to developing solutions. Here are 5 practical recommendations in the coordinated or joint management of common energy and water resources. First, it is imperative that we use clear and specific terminology for energy as a topic. When dealing with energy, the specification of resource input type, such as coal versus wind, energy mix composition regarding how much of your energy is from one input type or another, transmission, and distribution are all different components which need to be specified under the umbrella term of energy governance. Transmission and distribution networks and their management are a part of the system, but are not necessarily dependent on one type of resource input used to deliver the same energy output. For example, the same electrical energy will be transmitted and distributed through transmission networks regardless if the input energy source is a coal or renewables project. Second, polycentrism, or multiple location, and horizontal alignment in authority and decision-making structures in both public agencies as well as private organizations are essential. Teamwork and knowledge sharing must occur. Governing and managing resources like water at all levels require collaboration, experimentation, information sharing, and visionary decision-making. Resource dilemmas in energy planning, for example, have been shown to be successful when planning authority is shifted more from the national level to the regional level. Researchers have noted issues with the current centralized resource management systems of many countries, namely opaqueness, waste, inequality, and corruption. Conversely, they have found that natural resource dilemmas have been shown to be successfully solved by smaller group collaboration, the collaboration fostered by other factors such as sustained communication, risk and cost distribution, and trust. Using Mexico's Pemex and South Africa's Eskom as examples, the monopolization of centralized national energy utilities has played roles in not only stunting research and development into alternative technologies and spurring diversified industry growth, but also contributing to high social costs and even civil unrest. In countries with large wage gaps and centralized, monopolistic energy utilities, a great share of their populations are often left with either unreliable electricity supply, energy services that are too expensive to afford, or singular fossil fuel-based methods to meeting energy demand, further harming human and environmental health. And as these resource industries only become increasingly more valuable, it is important to decentralize their management and allow entrepreneurs, professionals, and investors to meet more location-specific energy and water needs, spur economic growth, and meet the growing demand for sustainability in public and private industry. Third, fostering innovation and trust in decision-making is crucial. Using, as an example, the state reform experience in Nordic states, namely Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, including their associated territories of Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and the Åland Islands. From the 1980s until present day, Nordic governance strategies have prioritized polycentralism and decentralization in areas like education and healthcare, fostering trust in resource conservation, such as Finland's every man's right, and experimenting with governance strategies that encourage innovation and adaptability in both the public and private sectors. According to Lütkens, approximately 85% of Nordic citizens believe that you can trust others. This has been shown to correlate with low levels of variation in culture, language, religion, and income. Simultaneously, Nordic citizens highly trust their government, with essentially zero corruption occurring in any of the 5 Nordic states. Without trust, there cannot be confidence, which is the critical factor in spurring long-term investments, which is one of the ways that Sweden was able to emerge from its economic slump in the 1930s. Long-term thinking for water and energy governance strategies will require such trust between government, private industry, and citizen to spur investment into renewables, water, energy efficiency, and similar initiatives. In a country like the United States, learning both from the financial crisis of 2008 and loosely regulated financial policy, as well as numerous government scandals of elected leaders, like with the Trump administration in the United States, this neoliberal capitalist system of government, which involves short-term gains-seeking economy, has lowered trust between citizens, government, and private industry, effectively hindering the ease at which long-term investments into water and energy projects may be made. Additionally, in a larger and more diverse melting pot of a nation, like South Africa or the United States, it becomes more difficult to implement a high level of trust for long-term investment when the country not only has a larger population, but more types of people, and is operating on an economic model grounded on neoliberalism as a frame. Because the Nordic model relies on homogeneity by nature, the diversity in certain larger countries may present too many obstacles to implement this model successfully. Thus, in decision-making, it is imperative for economists, policymakers, or academics to move from neoliberalism, which is a greed-driven management system, toward a system grounded on trust, transparency, and inclusivity when searching for alternative models, particularly in decision-making regarding energy, land, and water. In contrast to neoliberalism, information sharing in resource governance strategies is made easier now by more horizontally aligned, self-managed mass communication systems, which can be employed at the government level. Castells argues that political dynamics are based on socialized communication, in other words, the capability to influence the way others think. Though the concept holds true in modern-day politics, the means by which this is achieved has gone through countless transformations in the past 100 years. In the early 1900s, radio and newspaper were the leading methods of information transfer from one single investigatory source communicated hierarchically to listeners or readers. Even in the dawn of television, this vertically aligned system of information transfer remained largely the same, the difference being a greater number of people able to be reached in a shorter amount of time. At present day, however, politics operating through digital media on an instantaneous information sharing basis is drastically altering not only the way that information is created, but transmitted. Prior to the digital age, centrally organized information institutions could choose what to share and what to omit, as generally the public had few effective means of knowing otherwise. What was not in the mainstream media was not in the public mind. Today, a slew of different media platforms, such as social media or email, have now allowed information to be spread among the public horizontally across the world instantaneously, from data point to data point, or person to person. Castells describes this as self-managed mass communication. Centralized information transfer systems are becoming obsolete not only for news, but information sharing between public and private industry, with significant implications for energy and water governance strategies. For example, in an ideal democratic scenario, where regional water and energy decisions are fully inclusive of public opinion and weighed equally, the digital media through which horizontal information sharing and voting is now possible may have significant implications in extending the reach of democracy and knowledge sharing over decisions that are made regarding resource management, according to Stoika e Kilikmiku. Finally, a participative and transparent process in land space planning for strategic water and energy projects is essential. Though the wind itself cannot be privatized, the land on which turbines are erected may be. Sustained and equally weighted deliberations between stakeholders in decision-making processes around energy and water projects has been shown to reduce conflict. It is important to maintain that one singular model for resource governance and management will not be successful as an umbrella plan worldwide. Polycentric, horizontally aligned, adaptive, and deliberative governance strategies will likely succeed in devising plans of action for sustainable resource management on a distributed and mass scale. Should clean water and energy become a governmental mandate or just a goal for all players in this industry? Having something mandated often implies a top-down approach to governance with little room for deliberation or alternative scenarios. Instead, collaborative and deliberative systems of governance that have been proven to work with respect to similar resource management strategies in the past may prove useful as an effective guiding framework. To the question of whether or not energy and water resources should be privatized, it depends on the specific case. Some have argued against the privatization of natural resources due to societal value or a lack of accessibility in times of need. However, harvesting or collecting, treating or processing, and distributing water and energy is not free and must be financed from somewhere. This cost can be incurred by the government, likely resultant in taxation, by private industry with resource control, or we could get the water and energy ourselves. One important element here is having clear laws and regulations that define what types of waters and energy are declared public and which are private. In the case of water, one good example is Mexico, where Article 27, Paragraph 5 of its national constitution lists the types of waters that are considered public, and the Federal Law of National Waters of December 1992 regulates these public or national waters. The same Article 27 says that any other waters not included in the list described will be considered part of the property of the land where they exist and will be subject to state law. In this case, the rainfall caught from the sky by a private property owner or the continuous natural flows emanating as live waters from the ground, such as a geothermal spring, within the boundaries of a private property, are considered private and accessory to the land. Mexico's energy laws and regulations are also very clear and have been updated via its recent National Energy Reform Program. Other countries around the world should also have clear legal and institutional mandates for water and energy. Such regulations are important for entrepreneurs and investors, and for technology transfer projects. Further, an increasing amount of conversations between public and private parties with jurisdiction and involvement in water and energy industries as a whole is essential. Both industries are exciting, fast-growing, and their increased use of technology for optimized management invites a slew of opportunities for entrepreneurs, professionals, and investors who are willing to seize the opportunities available in each. For example, in terms of new installed capacity, solar energy surpassed all other new energy sources in 2017 and is expected to continue a high trajectory of growth alongside wind and hydroelectric. The solar industry's fast growth is attributed to the steep drops in the cost of manufacturing, increasing technology efficiencies, and policy pressures for more alternative methods of electricity production. What is known in the academic community as the renewable energy revolution describes a fast-growing uptake of renewable technologies across the globe, often in new and exciting locations. Having attained a master's degree in sustainable development with a focus in renewable energy, my own research projects took me to multiple sub-Saharan African countries where I was able to bear witness to the explosion of renewable technologies in places I would have never expected. Distribution and control of natural resources is an ongoing topic in our increasingly globalized society today, and how to best go about managing energy and water sources will be an adaptive conversation in itself. Even during the time at which conversations are occurring to move past the 1800s model of industrialism upon which our global economy still largely rests, societal shifts in equality, wealth distribution, employment, age, migration, and consciousness are simultaneously occurring. Hence, the conversation must be an ongoing one, to include adaptability and inclusivity in a polycentric approach to water and energy resource control, foster trust between government and citizens, which in turn will encourage long-term investments, and collaboratively meet the needs of a growing and urbanizing global population, and a more technologically advanced rural and agricultural sector of our economies. Finally, we must never forget that the key to the success of all organizations today is sustainability, and those involved with water and energy must be particularly creative and visionary in this regard, leveraging the many innovations and technologies that have emerged in the last few years. For example, the researchers of Suzhou University in Suzhou, Jiangsu, China, have recently found a way to capture the potential energy from raindrops to convert it into electrical energy. This means that in the near future, solar panels will have the ability to produce green energy in geographic areas that do not necessarily have sunshine most of the year, overcoming one of the major drawbacks of solar panel use around the world. Effective governance of water and energy will increasingly require a global mindset with innovation and technology as its main weapon. I have no doubt that the effective management of water and energy, with their intertwined global dynamics, will be increasingly the key to a better world for all. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Now let's go to Module 2 of this program.